Jean Ellen Cowgill, an entrepreneur and media innovator whose journey is nothing short of remarkable. As the founder of Portrait Creative Network, Jean is transforming how the media and entertainment industries collaborate.
Being able to have a space that is intentionally designed for long-standing, long-term, your professional career in creative spaces where you can see and stay in touch across project to project, moment to moment within the industry, festival to festival, premiere to premiere, that feels like something unique.
In this conversation, Jean discussed the challenges faced by media professionals today and also reflects on the significance of authenticity in content creation and offers valuable advice for aspiring creatives.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about who's Jean Ellen in general, and then we'll go deeper about how you ended up building Portrait and all that. But I think mostly we're curious of way back, how did you introduce yourself to the professional world?
Sure. Great question. So most of my career has been spent on the business side of media and entertainment. I started out my career in your kind of classic management consulting role, and then went from there into a chief of staff and head of strategy role at The Atlantic. The Atlantic and Atlantic Media are, some may know, The Atlantic is a magazine in the US, but they have a global audience. And wonderful. Thank you to hear. It's always great to hear about a subscriber. And I joined at a time when we were in growth mode. So we were building new brands, we were profitable and growing and thinking about expansion. So I was writing the business plans for a lot of new ventures and new businesses, including Quartz, which was our global business brand, and CityLab, which was eventually acquired by Bloomberg. And then I also wrote a business plan for a creative agency because we started to hear from a lot of large companies as well as other media organizations and various institutions. Wow, The Atlantic seems to have really figured something out when it comes to this new social web. This was in the kind of early 2010s. Can you come in and help us figure out how we should be presenting our brand and what content we should be putting out in this new universe? And so it felt like there was a real opportunity to create a full service agency that would go kind of above and beyond what we were able to do with advertising partners to help them think through their entire content strategy. So I wrote the business plan for that business, and our owner turned around and said, great, let's let the child run the business. And said, you run it. Wow. So I took that business on and built that over the course of 8 years into the fastest growing revenue division at the time, team of over 50 people. And it was an incredible experience building that agency. From there, my boss went on to be CEO at Bloomberg Media and recruited me to build out our new streaming and social video network, which was a complement to Bloomberg Television. So if Bloomberg Television is very much financial news and covering global breaking news, we were building a lot of Bloomberg originals and programs and talent-driven shows for streaming and social properties. And across the course of both of those experiences, I really saw how I was building external networks of amazing talent with directors and producers, but also how difficult it was to stay in touch with them and see what they were up to now, what projects they were working on now, who they were working with now, et cetera. And so it just felt a little crazy to me that there wasn't a space where it made it easy to see project to project who was working with whom across all of these different types of creative platforms and efforts. And that really was the beginning of what led to the launch of Portrait.
That, sometimes, you go through so much in life that finally when you're in the right path, if one has ever wondered, why have I even went through this? Finally makes sense. Tell me a little bit, like, how did you end up in all this media environment, media industry itself?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved I've always loved media and entertainment. It's always been something that, I think the ability to get lost in a story is one of the more powerful things in the world. And so I think
Yes.
I deliberately wanted to get into the business side of this universe because I think it's really important, especially now. I wouldn't have been able to say this when I first got into it, but I think the landscape is changing so quickly, and the ways in which we both make great content, make great stories, and also the ways that we distribute those stories is changing. And making sure that there are sustainable business models and sustainable careers matters. Um, we want to make sure that artists are able to create and sustain themselves, and I think we're in a period where that could go a lot of different ways, and we've seen already, even in the past 15 years, there have been platforms and efforts that become, are incredible for democratization of creation of incredible stories. And also we've seen whole career paths be wiped out. So it feels like a really important space to play in, where one can potentially make a difference in how stories get made.
I think if one has to think about entertainment in general, is definitely the fastest way to influence people's spirit, or opinions, or like, it's kind of like the highway for feelings and truth and opinions, and not only for a journalist but for like people that want to like build up dreams further on for others. So Jean, I think like from everybody that I've had talks with so far, you come across as the most knowledged in the space for having been through so much, having experienced so much throughout your career. That's what led you to build Portrait. What is your dream about Portrait? Because I believe that from what our, like from Olyn's perspective and my perspective, it's very powerful what you just like did. But I want to like kind of have your own words describing that big vision for the company and why you wake up every morning so motivated, to keep going with the company as founder, and female founder, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. So might be helpful to just say Portrait Creative Network. We are a new professional platform that is connecting the creative industries together, starting with a focus in media, marketing, and entertainment. And I think what makes us different from a lot of the platforms that have launched in the past is that, there have been a whole host of gig platforms that have been launched that are very transactional, where it's very focused on, okay, I need to find, a individual to join our crew last minute, or I need to, pull someone in for an on-location shoot last minute. And that's great. Like, I think there's a real service being provided by those platforms. But there isn't a platform where you're going to see a director who is, building their careers, winning major awards, going to lots of different festivals. There's not really a space for that person to stay easily in touch with both the head of programming that might hire them again, or the funder who they might work with again, or the cinematographer that they love working with or that their friend mentioned they should work with. There aren't really spaces where it's easy to stay in touch across a whole variety of needs. When you think about what exists today, there are a whole host of different mass media social channels. So there's LinkedIn, which is really built for corporate careers and resumes. So you can't see who's doing what at a project level. There's Instagram, but that is very difficult to use for search. So if I wanted to think about like, oh, who is that director that I started following? Or who do I know who is working in this specific genre? You're not able to actually use Instagram as a place to go back through your directory very easily, especially as Instagram pivots to compete with TikTok. And so being able to have a space that is intentionally designed for long-standing, long-term, your professional career in creative spaces where you can see and stay in touch across project to project, moment to moment within the industry, festival to festival, premiere to premiere, that feels like something unique that hasn't existed in the past. So our goal is to build a powerful network that brings these different, I even say plural, industries together, because people are working across these different spaces now, right? Yeah, you can talk to individuals who are working, when they're doing this year a film that's going to Sundance, and they're also doing a major commercial for a brand, and they're also doing something really interesting on social media. So they're playing across these different creative spaces. We want to be the infrastructure that brings all these individuals together, and also a space where it makes it really easy to stay in touch and keep track of all those contacts over time. And if we can do that, when we think about the big vision that supports, all of a sudden there are new ways of making things. There are new people who are going to find each other and be able to find ways of funding and distributing their content that they wouldn't have found before. The power of light connections and making those connections and keeping them and using them over time is exciting, and certainly what keeps us, I think, at Portrait going.
Yeah. I mean, extremely interesting. And as I said before, like cutting you off, I said segmentation is powerful. And my point about it was bringing people together for a particular reason. That network can become a very powerful thing that can change directions of markets and so forth. Jean, like, I'm really curious with your professional experience at Bloomberg and The Atlantic, now running and leading the way for Portrait to, grow the network, which is already extremely big from my perspective. One of my questions is, how do you see the overall media industry today? And where media industry should go? Because every single newsletter that I receive from Substack, independent journalists, or whoever, they all have to complain that the system is broken. And at Olyn, we speak a lot with creators that they feel that their options are off, and for their content to become a big deal, like it always relies on the hands of few people out there. So my question to you is like, as you're looking into the industry itself with your expertise, what's your take on where their flaws are and how can improve, and how others perceive it besides your own opinion? But I will start first with your own opinion. That for me is the most valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think given everything that has happened over the past, year and a half in media and entertainment, from the strikes in the United States to a kind of reckoning at various streamers and consolidation that is happening across the industry, I think sometimes the first thing to solve a problem, the first thing is to recognize that there is a problem. And I do think more than ever before, there is an understanding that the old models have broken down, and that the new models that have taken their place in some cases are not fully sustainable for people's careers, are not helping them to get their content out there. But I also think there's a ton of creativity happening as a result, right? Because people recognize that it's time to figure out new ways of building creative careers and getting their art into the world. And it's also true that it's in some ways never been easier to put something out there. It's a crowded landscape, but with the rise of social media, self-distribution,
right,
there is more power, there is more possibility in terms of the way you tell a story and the way you get it out there. So I certainly don't pretend to know where the industry is going to go over the next 5 years or even the next 12 months. But I think that the general recognition that the state of play has become untenable in a lot of ways, and the push by a number of different factors to look for better solutions is really exciting.
You're on point about your focus day to day being on making portrait as large as possible network for the media industry. And you're actually very correct on your answer, saying like you don't know where it's going. I'm just making sure those people talk and they're together to give them the power to even have these conversations of shaping it if there's a need of it in first place. So that's fair to say, considering like you as a leader and founder CEO of Portrait Creative Network. My question to you is like, how are those early days building Portrait Creative Network? You've had quite very strong positions in the media industry by having worked at Atlantic and Bloomberg. So, how was those months where you made the shift and decided to go and build Portrait? There has been something inside you saying like, this is the best way I can dedicate my time, and this is what future generations deserve.
Yeah, I mean, I think that building new businesses inside larger companies were both those experiences were kind of like training grounds for launching a new wholly independent startup. It's my first time as a startup founder, but it's my third time building something new in the world. And so I think that early on taught me how exciting and rewarding it is to create something in the world that wasn't there before, and also to see the power of building teams and seeing cultures develop within those teams that, again, didn't exist before. So I had seen how exciting that can be. And I think then starting to realize there was an opportunity to build something that would solve a need that I had experienced directly at the Atlantic and Bloomberg, this frustration around like, how am I staying in touch with this amazing talent? I'm sure many people listening to this podcast have had the experience where they're embarking on a new project and thinking, oh gosh, like, who do I know who would be great for this? Or who should I call that might be able to help me think through the right team for this or the right people to talk to for this project? I had that so many times at Bloomberg where we'd be sitting around a conference table brainstorming, and it would just feel like there's got to be a better tool out there to help us do this. And so I think having that experience myself and feeling like there aren't the tools available to keep track of my universe of talent over time, that combined with my love of building new things just kind of gave me the itch to make the leap, and begin building the company out on its own. But it is for anyone out there who's thinking about launching something new, whether that's building a company or starting a film or anything. It's a leap of faith always.
I mean, that's a good point in a leap of faith, because you do as much as you do, but at the end you have to make this pause to let the customers, audience respond to it and the dynamics of it. My biggest admiration in who you are as a person, because we had previous conversations, and your humbleness, considering like these big titles you've had in the media industry, and not only like going through the troubles and storm of building a company from the ground and take it out there, considering everything you learn from the industry. You as a person, what's your personal drive? Because I think myself, I feel it, but it's very nice to hear it from the person itself, as like who's Jean's drives, and you can tell me like it's not about impressing. It's just about letting the audience understand that there's a human and a person behind all this always, right? Trying to close to people and like having experienced so much. So me personally, as I said, I'm extremely fond of you and your work, and I look up to you and your career, and even in our company, we look up to your advice. So in that sense, I want people know who Jean Ellen is at a core. On her day to day, what are her hobbies, and what are...
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot of that question. I mean, I think on the question around drive, I feel like there's nothing more rewarding than creating something in the world that didn't exist before that is meaningful to other people, and that includes both the people who are using the thing that you've created. So in our case, using Portrait and able to do things they wouldn't have been able to do before. It also means internally, seeing someone's career grow in ways that might not have happened had they not had the opportunity to come in and do something within the company. So that to me is the most exciting thing one can do. And on a personal level, I like doing things I've never done before. I think it's important to scare yourself because why not? If it fails, then that's okay too. It's I think it's important to try things that freak you out a little bit on a regular basis and see where it takes you.
Yeah, getting out of the comfort zone, right? And
Yeah, that's right.
discover.
That's exactly right. That's
I
exactly
mean,
right.
what I would say is like Portrait is already like far along, and it means like you've crossed a lot of bridges that might
Oh, thank
have,
you.
you know. So you know, um, one of the things I can avoid asking about the creative industry in general
Hmm.
is perhaps like in your career, the AI technology and data driven content, but mostly AI was not as obvious as it is today. So, how do you see that balance between technology and human creativity evolving in the next decade? Like now, I'm asking like Jean Ellen, the visionary.
I mean, I think I am very skeptical of people who suggest that the creative industry, as in the people working in the creative industry, will all be like quote unquote replaced by AI. I think we will see that AI is a tool for creation. And while it will have major disruptive power in the industry and not always necessarily for good, I think ultimately it is another tool that leads to new things that people are building. You're already seeing creators play with AI and build things they wouldn't have been able to do. I've spoken with producers and directors who talk about how it yet again breaks down the barriers between different types of creative careers and different tools that one can use. I think even before the major advances in large language models over the past, pick your time frame, 5 days, 6 months, year. Even before then, we'd already seen a trend in the industry at large where the specialized skills that one needs to work in film versus TV versus, putting together a YouTube series versus working on a music video versus working in gaming. Like we're already seeing individuals work across these industries more fluidly than they ever have before as the tools make it easier to switch back and forth. Not to say there isn't, very valuable specialized skills in each of these areas, but we're certainly seeing more fluidity. And I think that we will only see more of that with the rise of AI. Again, I don't want to sound like a Pollyanna. That doesn't mean it's all going to be good, right? Like there will be disruption that will cause um, difficulties. But ultimately, I think AI becomes a tool in the toolkit, the same way that visual effects is a tool that has expanded our toolkit of what's possible. or the ability to create entire immersive worlds in the gaming space, right? We've seen the ways in which these new tools and set of tools empower whole new ways of building, stories.
Even when I'm thinking about portrait and the network itself and all your career. To me, there is one matching interest above all, which is you're in the attention economy, right? And we all know that nowadays it has become the most valuable currency. Apparently, time, less about money. Where do you spend it? How you spend it? And quick content has made itself in a place as a way of telling stories, but and general creating meaningful engagement, I would say. But there's always the question about authenticity, and we are looking into a world where we're seeking vulnerability because we think that's how a truthful message will come along because somebody can speak up. So my question about how do you think authenticity in a world where vulnerability can be a brand strategy will thrive? Because at the end of the day, it seems like it can be corrupted because somebody wants to market that message versus just having a genuine engagement with the community itself. Maybe I made it too complicated the question on its own, but my purpose of it is if we are living this era where I take TikTok or Instagram and I can have a voice and earn community's attention, how much do you think the algorithm itself prizes those that their interests are to market their vulnerabilities versus just pure genuine engagement in that sense, and how you have seen that coming along, if that's something on your agenda?
Sure. I mean, I'd say I think with the flood of content available today, consumers and viewers are ever more skeptical and sophisticated in their choices and in understanding what's out there. That's not to say that, there aren't people who are getting, we've certainly seen that there's more misinformation out there today than ever before across a whole host of different issues. So I'm not suggesting that doesn't exist, but I do think that we've seen an overall trend towards people becoming more just skeptical of what they're looking at and more likely to question the source, more likely to consider whether it feels authentic. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but there certainly have been studies done that show the younger audiences, Gen Z and younger, are growing up in an age where they learn to question what they see early on. And actually, it's some of the older audiences that can be, less sophisticated in what they're looking at because they just didn't grow up with it. I mean, myself included, I recognize that, even, people 10, 15 years younger than me are growing up in a totally different universe than I did. And I think what that means for a content creator, whether that's an individual or a brand, is there needs to be a humanity behind the content and a specificity that you can feel, when you're watching the content. There was a great piece done recently in the New York Times where they had a short story written by a writer, a human writer, versus by AI. And on the one hand, it was very impressive how what an AI storyteller can do, and also it felt too slick. It didn't have a heartbeat behind it. It didn't feel like there was a specific voice coming through the story, whereas the human writer, you could feel that there was a specific point of view coming through and a quirkiness, which I think people are attuned to.
It's interesting you're saying all this because for me, Jean, as you were explaining, and in my head and in my mind, I'm taking so many notes about everything you're saying, is Gen Z definitely defines a new way of how to treat content and generally speaking, I think they're the best when it comes to how to spend their time. They seem to be very good selectors. I'm saying this because personally, from my youngest cousins and everything, I learned bunch as the recommendations they give me. Where are the science YouTube channels, and what's the documentary that's worth my time because they read it on a TikTok and they heard something in a Discord chat, and wow, they're so digitally connected to the world that I myself I feel like I'm a little detached, and sometimes just automatic algorithm suggestions will do. So now, Jean, like if you have to, kind of like distance yourself from being on the other side, what's the ideal experience that you would like to have as a consumer or a viewer of everything that is given to you through the media and entertainment industry?
Oh, wow. That's quite a question. The ideal experience. I mean, I think that varies, right? I mean,
Right.
I think it depends on what I'm in, like sometimes we're looking to laugh, sometimes we're looking to be entertained, sometimes we're looking to be informed. I've seen some incredible, incredible documentaries where I wouldn't say that it was a happy experience, but where I'm so glad that I now
Hmm.
understand a certain issue better, and I connected with it both intellectually and emotionally.
I, I think
So
like my
perhaps, oh, go ahead.
question, Jean, is more related to um, knowing how the industry is now. Want it or not, you're also on the other side as a consumer of press and films. How would you like these professionals that are behind this content to think about the
Mm.
future, the way they're doing things, to bring you the uttermost amazing? Like, do you want them to be more courageous? Do you want them to be less about like that? Like, I think like it. I frame my question a little wrong. More
No, yeah, that's good.
the interest of you speaking from a consumer perspective, how you wish for them to keep track of their principles and values to serve you
Sure.
ultimately, because you would love to see the future going this way as a consumer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite projects that I've seen, you know, in general or over the past year, again, have been the ones where you can really feel the kind of idiosyncrasies of the creator. And that includes both, films where it doesn't have to be a perfect film, but where
Right.
you can just feel the specificity of the storytelling, or in literature when it doesn't have to be a perfect plot, but where you can just feel the voice of the writer coming through. Um, I recognize and I hear so often from our members on Portrait, it is a very difficult time to be creating. And so I think I feel humbled by the work that everyone who are members of Portrait and Beyond do to get their stories out there. So far be it from me to say how they do it today. But I'd say that in terms of as a consumer, what I love seeing and what I appreciate the most is when you really feel that specific sense of point of view and humanity come through. And whether that means telling the story in a multi-part short form series on social media, or series on YouTube, or a independent film, or I was talking with a screenwriter the other day who has kind of transitioned to becoming more of a director, because she was like, look, like I scripts, it's really hard to get a script through, but if I make it and put it out there in full as a short, then people pay attention. So I think I'm most impressed by the individuals who look at the difficulties in the industry right now and say, well, I'll just find, where this path doesn't work, I'm just going to find a new one and try new ways of getting my story out there. And where you feel that specificity come through. I think there's a lot of conversation right now around um, projects that can feel very professionally produced, but where when you actually get into watching them, they feel
Mhm.
too slick, where it feels like this has been dumbed down, or where, I don't feel that kind of beautiful quirkiness and specificity of the story. And so, when those come through, I think they really they really speak to me and I think to a lot of people.
I like what you're saying. I think you're right on point, because ultimately, Jean, sometimes we need a little, naivete to speak purely about our desires. But I think people that know both sides of the coin, they have more of a say than others, because they know the reality on both sides. I think to kind of like consciously wrap this up, because we've taken a lot of time from you already. Just like tell me where, like, describe it to me as if already has happened. How is Portrait 10 years from now? Where is the company, and how much of an impact has generated in the entertainment industry?
We're aspiring to be the leading professional network and talent management platform for creative industries writ large. What does that mean? It means both that if you are a creator, a director, a producer, a writer, actor, someone working in, any creative space, you are able to use Portrait to stay in touch with your network, see who's working with whom on what projects are coming out, be able to showcase your work in an environment where you are supported and surrounded by a professional community on the one side. And on the other side, on the talent management side, where individuals in careers like the ones that I've had, the roles I've had at Bloomberg or the Atlantic, you're able to keep track in a way that is seamless and easy and efficient of all of the different potential individuals that you've worked with over time, that your peers have worked with, and be able to come back to those individuals really effectively. So many individuals right now are trying to keep track of that in Excel sheets and Airtables and on their phone. And we want to make that process a lot more seamless. And as a result of all of that, I think it provides the space for all kinds of exciting projects to develop, to get funded, to get distributed, to be made that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I ultimately want to build Portrait for the paths that our members and our community want to take. So, we both have a strong vision for what the company and what the platform can become. And also, we are ultimately building for the community. And so I will always look to bring humility to what we're building, because it is here to empower the creators at the end of the day. And we want to listen to what they tell us they need. So both excited to see and to build what we see needed in the industry, and also we're listening at all times.
And now I'm going to make a question, because I'm sure like the audience is as curious as I am, but is, considering your successful career, what's the advice that resonated with you the most? And if you can share it, maybe because it's one you gave to yourself or because somebody else like passed it on, but what's that thing that it's been echoing in your mind that kept you striving on the industry and career?
Great question. I remember early on at the Atlantic, with the creative agency that I was building then, we had a large client that ultimately decided to kind of reconsolidate their work under their headquarters. And so the work that we were doing kind of got, pulled back into their HQ. And so we lost the client. And this was at a moment when we would have, this was a big part of our revenue. It was a big deal. It'd be the equivalent of, a filmmaker losing a major piece of their funding, or, someone, losing a job opportunity that they thought they had. And I remember this was, again, early on when I had kicked off the business, and I remember going to our owner to let him know that we had lost the client, and pretty much like, shaking in my boots to admit this had happened. And he said, well, whatever you do, don't stand still. Take this and learn from it and keep moving. And the worst possible thing you could do in this moment is to freeze. And I think about that moment a lot. I think it's important for anyone working in a fast-moving creative career where the ways that we told a story yesterday may not be the ways that we can tell it today, or the ways that we get a project off the ground may not be the ways that we can get a project off the ground today. So keep moving, I guess is the advice that I would give.
It sounds like very basic, but for me, it's kind of, like sometimes you need to be reminded of the common sense of things. So keep moving. It's like the hardest thing sometimes because one can have ways of getting stuck with challenges and everything. And he's like, no, but you have further direction. So that was really beautifully said, Jean.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so grateful of your time. And as I said before, as we started this podcast, I'm a big fan of your work. Even at Olyn, we think like for our own business, your, initiative and how far you got portrait along, like can change directions even for us. So we are grateful of your efforts and we are very interesting to see you succeed. And I'm sure like the audience will follow you. And if not, I highly suggest that they will like keep a close eye to you because you definitely give a sense of direction of where things could go, or at least make sure like they're in the same room to talk about it.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been wonderful to talk with you today. And I hope everyone will check out Portrait. They can find us at www.onportrait, that's onportrait.com. You can also follow us on social media, and please apply to be a member. We hope that some folks listening will check us out and request an invitation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jean.